Rolling. Hello, welcome back to another sporadic YouTube of mine. We've got Gigi back in because I am no good at filming myself these days, so we'll just get Gigi in, because why not? It's been a good return on investment, I think. We're going to do Q&A today. I was getting upset the other day. I spoke to Gordon and I said, Gordon, I'm getting about 2,000 story views and it's normally 6,000, and I'm about to put out a Q&A box. Luckily, Instagram fancied treating me well on that day, and we got some really good questions. So I've picked about 13, 14. We'll see how many we get through. If it's time for some more, I'll do some more. But these are pretty good. I think these will give you a good idea of lots of things. I'm going to start chronologically as well. So the first one is from my client, Chad Tapper. You all know Chad Tapper if you follow me on Instagram, because he's absolutely peeled. He's going to compete in 10 days, next Sunday. So he's asked me who or what was my inspiration to bodybuild. This is a bit of a backstory. I was my own inspiration to bodybuild because I was a skinny boy. I was so skinny. I was skinny as a kid. I was a late bloomer. I don't think I had leg hair until I was like 17. So as you can imagine, I was pretty sick of being tiny. I was never very good at any sport because, I'll put this down to because I wasn't very big. So slow and small, the worst combination. So when I got to uni, I basically was like, I've had enough of this, and I started training. The reason I waited until uni, and this is funny, so my family are actually all into training, and bodybuilding in particular. They've not competed, but my mum, stepdad, and my dad, they all are very much into training. Particularly my stepdad was into bodybuilding. He's got that Arnold's encyclopedia. However, I never used to like training because he'd built a gym on his house. So when me and my mum moved in with my stepdad, he'd already halfway through building the gym. Obviously, when lockdown hit year before last, I was thinking, I wish we still lived in our old house, because we had everything you needed. There was a hybrid hack squat leg press, a leg extension, bench, dumbbells, everything you'd need, but obviously we'd moved, so tough shit. Anyway, I didn't like training in there because every time I'd go in there, my stepdad would try and tell me, this is how you do it, this is how you do it, you're doing it wrong, and I just hated it. So I never did it, which is a joke really, isn't it? So I probably wasted a good few years when I could have been training. And then I went off to uni, and I was just sick of being small. At this point, I'd grown tall. I was like 6 foot, but I was 10 stone. I was so skinny. So I basically spent the whole of uni in a permabulk. So that was my inspiration to bodybuild. I never knew I was going to compete until third year of uni, but my inspiration was myself. I wasn't really looking at magazines and thinking, oh, I want to look like that, I want to look like that. I just wanted to be big in myself. As I got more and more stuck into bodybuilding, obviously took inspiration from more and more people. But now I'd say, even now, like massive inspirations like C-Bum, for example. But I think it's very important that you realise that you can't look like anyone else. You have to look like yourself, but the best version. I know it sounds corny, but that's what I want. I just want to look as good as I can, which I'm hoping will be pretty good. Question number 2. I'm not going to say who this is from because I don't know whether he wants me to publicise what he's asked me. But he said, have you ever struggled with body confidence? I'm currently in that phase and do I have any tips? I would say we all struggle with body confidence on some level, day to day, week to week, year to year, phase to phase in particular. I think specifically now, and I say this so often to a lot of my younger guys, and I address the younger guys as part of my following, that like the world we live in now, particularly with social media, like it's so hard not to think you need to be looking good or peeled all year round. I think it's a real problem. I was very lucky, I think, because when I started training, Instagram wasn't like a massive thing. So as I said, I just went on a permabulk for like 3 years and I didn't care about abs. I just wanted to see that scale weight going up, which don't take that as gospel, but that's just what I wanted. So I think first things first, like understand that Instagram and social media is a highlight reel, okay? That is the first thing. Don't pit yourself, don't pit your year 2 against someone's year 8. Don't pit your off-season against someone's prep, because there's people now that are prepping that looking fantastic, and obviously moving now into an off-season, it's very easy to think, just wish I was a bit slimmer. But in terms of tips, number 1 tip, and this is my tip if you've got a problem with anything, is fucking do something about it. Don't sit there wallowing in self-pity, thinking my arms are too small, I've got too much fat on my stomach. Don't think any of those things. Just think about the actions that you can take to get the outcome that you want. I think that's number 1. I think probably what a more PC answer would be is like practice a bit more self-love. So think about what you have got rather than what you haven't, and also look back at where you've come from, because I assume if you're asking this question, you've been training for a while. You know, look back at how far you've come. Another corny saying, but it's very, very true. So they would be my tips for body confidence. Question number 3. This one's from Jaw Pace 129. I imagine his name's George Pace. Hello, Jaw Pace 129. This one is, how long would you recommend training for before using steroids? Now, Jesus Christ, stop me, Gordon, if I go on too long about this one. I'm quite passionate about this one because it's probably the question that many of us in my position get on a daily, weekly basis. I imagine as the following grows, you get more and more. And they're really frustrating. And I don't mean to get frustrated at the person asking, but I can't help it. First things first, I don't really think that the question is phrased properly. How long would you recommend training for before using steroids? Because you might be training for 5 years, but you might really be still quite shit at training. You might be pretty crap at training. You might be pretty crap at managing all your variables. Like, I'm going to sound like an old teacher here. Have you got your nutrition in order? Do you even understand how to manipulate your nutrition to reach the goal you're after? So what I mean is, are you in a surplus or a deficit? Can you control that surplus or deficit as a fly in the camera? Can you control that as well? Can you control it for a phase? Are you still going out every weekend and getting pissed up? Are you taking recreational drugs? Where does training and bodybuilding and physique development in general sit in your hierarchy of importance? Because honestly, unless it is number 1, and you can be really honest and say, I'm doing everything I can to progress my physique, you shouldn't even be thinking about steroids, regardless of whether you've trained for 10 years or 15 or 20 or 2 years. Because I see people in the gym now that must have been training for 20 years, but like, I'll still say, why would you take steroids? Like, what is your goal, okay? So that is number 1, kind of, I've answered the question per se. The second thing is, when you're making that decision to jump on steroids, like, what is your goal? I have this conversation a lot. I am of the opinion that unless you're planning to compete and compete at a good level, steroids just shouldn't even be in the plan. And the door's just gone, so I'll go and answer that. I think I was talking about goals. I was talking about goals and their relation to the decision to take steroids. As I said, I am of the opinion that unless you are going to compete and compete at a high level, they just should not even be in your plan. There is a caveat to that, which I'll come on to in a minute. The other thing that I think is really important, so my decision, I've never really spoken about this on YouTube, but it's probably one for a whole other video, but my decision to take steroids was because I knew it was going to change my life. Like, I'd already competed a good few times naturally. I knew I loved the process, and I knew I wanted to be an IFBB Pro. And I also was pretty confident that I could become one if I took steroids, as sad as that is. And I don't regret it 1 minute, because it's completely changed my life. It's allowed me to have a platform, or at least it's allowed me to grow my platform to where it is. It's allowed me to compete. It's allowed me to go over to the States and compete. So I'm really like living my dream. And I couldn't have done that without anabolics, unfortunately, because I'm not that genetically blessed. And the final thing I'm going to finish on is to say, if you think that steroids are going to make you happy, if you think that the improvement in your body you're going to get from taking steroids is going to make you happy, you are largely misinformed. You know the whole happiness continuum. You'll just get a bit happier and then you'll just wish you were a bit bigger or a bit this or a bit that. Big arms don't make you happy, unfortunately. So really bear that in mind before you make that decision, because steroids undoubtedly impact your health. You can't argue that. And even though we're getting much better at managing the side effects, I think I like how Joe Jeffrey says this, like, taking steroids isn't safe. You can be safer, there is a safer use model, but it's not safe. It is going to impact you negatively. So be very careful when you make a decision. The next question is from Rich J. James. I interact with this guy quite a lot, to be fair. Thanks for your question, mate. Though it's a bastard. What is my 1, 3, and 5 year goal? Right. First things first to tell you, I am like notoriously bad at setting goals. And actually I've got time in my diary over the next week to set some goals, because I'm sitting down with my like accountant, financial planner to work out the financial goals, but that's not to say I know them. 5 years, I really don't know. For me, that seems like an absolute lifetime away. Like, if I think back to my life 5 years ago, I was probably in John Lewis working like a job that I didn't really like, but I still just tried to get good at because I wanted to earn more money. So 5 years for me is a long time away. I will be 33. I would expect the only goals I can put in stone that I would hope have happened by the time I'm 33 is marriage and kids. Let's say kids. Who knows about marriage? I'd like kids by the time I'm 33. And I dare say that by the time I'm 33, I'll probably be done competing. So whilst that's not a goal, that gives me a bit of framework. In terms of my business, I have no idea where I want my business to be. I really don't. Like, we want to be a millionaire, right? But I like to be realistic with my goals. So 3 years, that will leave me at 31. I reckon I'll probably be coming to the end of my competing career by that time. And I'd certainly like to be thinking about marriage and kids by then. But in terms of like business, I don't really know. 3 years feels like a long time when I think I need to sit down and spend more time thinking about that before I answer a quick Q&A. But if I can give you some quick ones, I'd probably like to have some more coaches under the business. Obviously at the moment it's just myself and Luke. Luke's doing great, but I'd love to have some more coaches under my belt. I've really found that process really enjoyable. I'd like to have a much bigger YouTube following. I would really like that to be a something that I achieve. And then also, no, I think I'm happy with those actually, in terms of 3 years. And then next year, you should have done 2 years because there would have been a competition in there. Over the next year, I just need to build a considerable amount of muscle. I would like to grow my business further than it is now. I'm not going to put numbers on it because I hate it when people do that. And I'd like Luke to have kind of a full book of clients within the next year. So that is where I'm at in terms of goals. I think this is question number 4, but I was just going to kind of skim over it because I've already answered it in that last question. So my client Liam, my IFBB Pro client Liam, asked me if kids are in my future plans, and yes, they definitely are. It's funny, I was speaking to Gigi before we filmed this video. That is one thing I'm damn sure of. There's not a lot else I'm damn sure of. So a very quick one there. We're going to number 5. I'm gonna switch up a little bit and take it to sort of competing, both for myself and for other people. So one person's asked, when competing, how would one know whether to choose men's physique or classic? So I actually think that the foundations for men's physique and classic are pretty similar. You'd like to have a nice taper, you want to have sort of wider shoulders, a smaller waist. Obviously, if it's classic, have you already got good legs? Have you got the ability to build good legs? If not, maybe best to stick to men's physique, unfortunately. But I would say that the groundwork, the foundations for both those classes are really quite similar. I think for classic, obviously, you probably want to have a bit more of a developed back. You need to be slightly bigger everywhere for classic, obviously, so bear that in mind. It's going to take you a bit longer. In terms of the midsection, I will gloss over this. Well, not gloss over it, I'll go over it. In terms of like the whole vacuum versus abs debate, I don't think a vacuum is something you need to be able to do to be classic, just to put that out there. Personally, I think it's a great look and I really think it helps, especially in some shots. But I don't think it's not mandatory. But obviously, you know, if you're doing men's physique, it's not going to offer you anything. And yeah, I think mainly it's going to be around like size. Like, do you want to compete in the next 2 years? Do you like men's physique? And are you in a bit of a hurry to compete, which is another conversation. If you are, then maybe you start with men's physique and then develop into classic. Like, that's probably what a lot of people do. You take Logan Franklin, for example. If you know Stanimal, he's gone from like men's physique to classic to open. So it's almost like it's a bit of a gateway drug into competing, if you like, for men, because it's the smallest of the classes, albeit not small anymore. And I would say it's the easiest. That's not to say that guys don't try any harder than any other classes, but you know, you don't have to cut your weight for certain divisions. You can get away with being a bit less lean. You don't need peeled glutes, for example. So bear that in mind. And then, does my future lay in men's physique or classic? I don't want to answer this openly. I think this is a conversation to have for another video, and I think I'll save it for that. But I love classic, is all I will say. I also like men's physique, but I love classic. But maybe we'll talk about this another day. Okay, I've lost count of what question we're on now, but I think it's 6. It could be 7. If we count Liam's in, it's 7. Without Liam's, it's 6. Who cares? I'm going to answer this one, which is a practical one, which quite a lot of the next ones are, to be fair. So, number 1, tips for early morning training from a nutritional standpoint. Now let me just get something quickly. So, what we've got here are Dean St. Mark's from Supplement Needs, Pre-Focus, and an intra-EAA. Now, the good thing about training in the morning is you can take any pre, it's not going to impact your sleep. In fact, it's going to help you. So if you want to load up on caffeine, then go for it. The next thing is EAAs. These are like, well, EAAs in particular, and probably an intra-carb powder, so like a highly branched cyclodextrin. Supplement Needs have the intra-carb. These are supplements that I would recommend are almost paramount if you are going to be training fasted in the morning. Fasted. So here are my tips. Number one, don't wake up and have a meal. Prioritize your sleep, okay? Get some longer sleep. You're going to recover better. You're going to perform better. You may not feel it, but you're going to perform better, particularly over time as you recover more. We know that sleep is like the most anabolic thing we can do aside from food. So number one would be make sure you're getting enough sleep. Don't cut your sleep out to get a meal in, because the amount of time you're going to need to scale back prior to your session is going to be quite long. Obviously, we know that digestion, or at least gastric emptying, takes about 2 hours. So what, if you're going to train at 6, you're getting up at 4 to get your meal in. Let's just sleep. When you wake up, you need to hydrate. So take on at least a litre of water, if not more, probably alongside some electrolytes as well. So again, another Supplement Needs product, the electrolytes, because you're going to be dehydrated. So you need to rehydrate the body, rehydrate the muscles, otherwise you're going to struggle to contract. Then I would recommend taking on a pre-workout. So this is just Pre-Focus. There is some stimulant benefits from this particular supplement, but as I say, Pre-Focus, pre-stim, pre-pump, anything with caffeine and stimulants in it will be fine at this time in the morning. You're probably going to need it, let's be honest. And then as you sort of on the way to the gym, I'd recommend you start getting some EAAs in, probably alongside some intra-carb powder. And the reason for that is, obviously, you've kind of got not much food running through the system at the moment. What the EAAs are going to do is help to prevent too much muscle protein breakdown, and obviously it's going to help to spike muscle protein synthesis. These are the two things that we kind of need to pay attention to when we're training. Training is going to cause muscle protein breakdown. It's also going to cause, the EAAs is also going to cause a spike in muscle protein synthesis, which is what we need to like recover and repair from our training. So that would be my tips. Next one. These two are not in any sort of order. Top 5 clothing brands. I know I keep saying this. I'm going to do a video on clothing at some point. I actually really like Tom's, what he did the other week, where he got asked questions about it, rather than me just like talking to you about clothing, because I'm not a fashion designer at the end of the day. I just like my clothes. Anyway, number 1 is obviously Cole Buxton. I basically live in Cole Buxton. I probably wear at least one piece of Cole Buxton every day. The reason behind this really is because I'm at a point now where fit and feel and fabric is more important to me than anything. And the clothes just fit. They fit and they look good. And also because I work for myself, I don't have to go anywhere looking smart very often. So the athletic essentialism works very well. So Cole Buxton, number 1. Number 2, can't not mention, would be Represent. These guys are not too dissimilar to Cole Buxton. I know the two brands have a bit of beef as well. Particularly like in Represent's bottoms at the moment. Unfortunately, the tops are a bit short for me. But 247 pants and just shorts in general, massive part of my arsenal. Number 3 would be Rude. So, American brand from LA, I think. Got introduced to Rude like last year, I think when I was in Dubai. Very much like what they're doing. Not too dissimilar to Represent in terms of like the graphics, the prints, the digital prints all look good, which I'm pretty excited about. I always like seeing what they're up to. They've just done a collab with McLaren actually, as in McLaren F1. And I always like those obscure sort of collaborations. Number 4 is obviously an accessory. I've got one item of clothing from this brand, they're pretty expensive. So this is 1017 Alex 9SM. Bit of a like gothic type style brand. You'll see a lot of the silver buckle detail, the hardware and detail. Just a bit unique, you don't see it from anyone else, and it's something I quite like. Again, their clothes actually fit me, but their accessories are cool as well. And then finally, which I've not got anything on me, would be Fear of God. Not Fear of God Essentials, I'm absolutely sick to the back teeth of that shit. It's been baited out so much and I kind of wish they'd just stop. But the normal Fear of God stuff is very nice. I only have one piece from them, which is a long sleeve t-shirt. But that sort of oversized, pared back colours like the black and the natural, there's no bright, bold colours I really like. As well as that sort of oversized, slouchy, old style sort of Yeezy fit is very cool. So that would be my top 5. A bonus would be Nike as well. Probably have more Nike than anything else, but obviously I train a lot, so there you go. Oh. Right, I don't even know anymore. We've gone over 10, who cares? The last question, the final question, from rjames91, who's looking pretty peeled in his pick. Mistakes I've made and regretted in my bodybuilding career. Right, I'm gonna encapsulate everything in this, not just like building muscle. Number 1, I just wish I started earlier. I obviously had a great opportunity to start training earlier and I just didn't take it. So I should have started when I was 16 and I'd be 2 years ahead of where I'm at now. Simple. But I didn't. So that would be mistake number 1. Mistake number 2 would be a particular mistake, and that was my first and second bodybuilding preps. I did a thing called carb backloading, which is a completely flawed method. And maybe we'll talk about it in another video, but the science behind it is stupid. It sounds very believable, and actually it's complete bollocks. You basically only eat protein and fat up until the point in the day when you train, and then after that you only eat protein and carbs. What this meant was, particularly on that second prep, I was only eating protein and fat and not very much of it until I trained about 5-6 p.m. after work. And I distinctly remember going in some leg sessions literally hypo when I was going in, having a hypoglycemic reaction and almost collapsing. Training performance absolutely terrible, because obviously I had no energy, which is like the number 1 thing you need to do to hold on to your tissue as a natural. I was natural at the time. And then obviously caning carbs in the evening, not necessarily a bad thing, but just a terrible method of dieting. And obviously it's just another way to hit a calorie deficit. So that would be a big mistake. And then the final thing I would say, and this is obviously really relevant and really recent, I don't think this was a mistake as such, more than a lesson. It's just my recent prep. So obviously I preach to make sure you're in a very good position to prep before you start a prep. You know, everything's settled, everything's solid. I just didn't even practice that one bit. I was all over the place, like in the probably 7 to 3 week out mark. It's probably the most stressed I've ever been. Never taken on so much in my life before that I had to sort it out. And then obviously I flew over to Dubai, then I went to America, loads of travel, spent a load of it on my own, completely lost enjoyment in it. And effectively like bummed out that whole prep. That could have gone on for much longer if I was feeling better about myself, and I wasn't. So that'll be my final mistake, if you like, or regret. But I'll call that a lesson more than anything, and something that I sort of won't make that mistake again. So there we go, wrapping up on that final question. I hope you enjoyed that. I actually really enjoyed answering those questions. That was very cool. They were a good set of questions. Some completely useless in there, but if your question didn't get answered, then you know you asked a dumbass question. If you liked it, drop us a like. Come down into the comments box, ask me any questions, any further questions if you want to explore any of the questions that I've answered. And obviously, please hit the subscribe button so we can keep making fantastic videos, keep bringing you information, and keep entertaining you. Like, comment, subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next one.